Tourism has always been a major part of Florida's legacy, and St. Lucie County is very much part of that tradition. But have you explored all that St. Lucie County has to offer? From professional sport events to pristine waters and secluded environmental preserves, from marine education centers and museums to diverse cultural festivals, St. Lucie County has something for everyone. So join us as we vacation in our own backyard and send you postcards from home.
Welcome to Postcards from Home, a show that highlights St. Lucie County's natural and cultural treasures. I'm your host, Eric Gill, and each month we take a look at some of St. Lucie County's best-known parks, museums, and nature preserves, as well as highlighting some of its best-kept secrets. Now, Florida is known for its scenic landscapes, and no one captured those images better than A.E. Backus. And on today's show, we're going to visit the museum that bears his name. Located on Indian River Drive in downtown Fort Pierce, just yards away from the Indian River Lagoon, this 8,000 square foot public arts facility was established nearly 60 years ago by Backus himself. In addition to rotating special exhibits throughout the year, the Backus Gallery houses the largest collection of Backus paintings in the world, as well as a large collection of works by the Florida Highwaymen. The museum recently completed a $1 million expansion, adding an additional 2,500 square feet of exhibit space. So let's not waste any more time and go inside and meet Kathleen Frederick, Executive Director here at the Backus Museum. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for welcoming us back to the Backus. It's been a few years.
It's been quite a few years, Eric. Thanks for coming.
I thought it was only like a year or two, and I went back and looked. It's always longer than I really think. But the Backus has been here in St. Lucie County for almost 60 years.
Almost 60 years.
That's amazing.
It's morphed quite a bit through the
Sure.
years, and it actually opened its doors in 1961 as the Gallery of Fort Pierce. It was never meant to be about Backus. It was his idea, but it wasn't about him. It was about an exhibition venue for public art. And then over time, it expanded. And when he died in 1990, the board voted to name it the A.E. Backus Gallery. Still named after him, but it wasn't about a collection of Backus paintings. Sure. And now here we find ourselves in 2017 with the nation's largest public exhibition of Backus paintings in a full museum setting. And that's quite a bit of progress for a little gallery in Fort Pierce, Florida.
Sure. Now, his background, was he born here? I knew he lived here a long time.
He was born here in 1906. Okay. His family had come here to grow pineapples, which were the crop before citrus. Yeah. And he was the third of 4 children, and they lived on the river. His father originally had a boat building company here. Yep. And
a skiff even, right? The Backus skiff?
All kinds of boats. Actually, they got to be quite a big national concern and sold their boats all over the country. And then during World War II, they acquired a lot of military contracts, and they moved their facility from the original place, which is basically where the Manatee Observation Center is, and they moved it across the river to where the Historical Museum is today, because they had Navy contracts and they needed to have a secure facility and a bigger facility.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the bases were around that time anyway.
Exactly, and when they vacated the property across the parking lot, that's when Backus took it over and rearranged the buildings and created what is now referred to as the old studio at 103 Avenue C.
Okay, which is now the Main Street office?
No, that's the new studio. That's
okay,
122 Avenue C. His old studio location doesn't actually exist anymore because the city took it for eminent domain to build the King Power Plant, which also doesn't exist anymore. Yes. But when that happened, he willingly sold his property for community improvement. It created the land that the museum sits on today. This was a filled park, and he moved about a block to the west to 122. He didn't want his customers to have to wonder where he'd gone to.
Kept the name.
That's right.
And he is one of several Fort Pierce or St. Lucie County residents in the Florida Artist Hall of Fame.
Yes, he was the first resident from Fort Pierce listed in the Artist Hall of Fame. And all others from this area who are in the Florida Artist Hall of Fame, which includes James Hutchinson, his brother-in-law, Jackie Bryce, who lives in Jupiter but was a student of his, and Alfred Heron, the Florida Highwaymen, all of those were students of A.E. Backus or mentored by him, and they are all part of what's referred to as the Indian River School of Art.
And even Zora Neale Hurston, who's in there, was touched by Backus as well, right?
She was indeed. Zora came here at the end of her life, and she met Backus, and like anybody else who was artistic or bohemian, she was drawn to the studio for the parties and the camaraderie and just this amazing experience of being there with music and laughter and painting and carrying on.
And you talked about the Indian River School of Art now, but some of his paintings also were done in the Caribbean as well, right?
Backus painted all over the world. That's something people don't realize. He's regarded primarily as a Florida artist, but early in his career, during World War II, he traveled the world aboard a troop transport ship that also transported refugees out of Europe, lots and lots of children, and they traveled all through Europe, they traveled through the South Pacific, and his paintings of those occasions pop up all the time. I literally had someone contact me from Bora Bora with a painting. Now that's
I thought
amazing.
That was a fictional place.
It
Bora
sounds
Bora.
like a
Yeah.
fictional place, Fiji, Bora Bora. No, but their father had been in the Navy, and he had met Backus when they were on shore leave there, and he bought a painting from him right then, and it has been in Bora Bora all these years. And thanks to the internet and Google, it arrived back here in Fort Pierce, Florida all these years later.
Now, how do you come about a lot of the collections? Is it residents? Obviously, with the internet, like you said, you get stuff from all over the world.
The paintings that are part of our collection are acquired from a variety of places. Some of them have been purchased by the museum as part of an acquisition program that was going full steam ahead prior to the economic meltdown. That put a bit of a damper on it. Many have been donated to us by people who own them and hold them in their private collections. Sadly, a lot of times people will discover that the painting that they just adore, their children really don't feel strongly about, and rather than see it sold, they donate it to the museum for significant tax advantages. Pay attention, folks. That's very important. Any museum looks for people to donate artwork to their collection, and of course, we're not for profit. Quite a few of them are here on extended loan from people who want to add to the exhibit that we have, and we are always grateful for people who will loan their paintings to us. We ask for at least a year-long loan so that we can exhibit it and insure it properly.
Right. Now, I imagine there's people too, because like especially with the High Amendment, a lot of these things were sold for $20, $30 30 years ago. People find this and they don't really realize the value that some of these have.
It still even happens with Backus paintings that are selling in the tens, 50,000 on up value, that people will come across one in a yard sale. I mean, people found a Jackson Pollock painting at a yard sale. It's worth millions of dollars. So one man's trash is another man's treasure. That's more of a phenomenon with the Florida Highwaymen paintings than in general Backus paintings. People very early in the 30s maybe paid $20 or $25 or $50, but it wasn't long before he was in the hundreds of dollars and thousands of dollars during his career, whereas early Highwaymen paintings, which were literally mass produced as a commodity and regularly sold for $20 and $25, and were viewed really strictly as decorative art, they ended up in yard sales and trash bins, and we see them much more commonly still found at bargain prices, and even though they're selling for not bargain prices.
Now, let's talk about the museum itself, the structure of the building, because you recently went through a renovation.
Oh, boy, did we ever. It's a little
A
more
long
than a
time
renovation.
coming,
It's a long time coming. We now have been able to add on our north end a 2,500 square foot museum-grade exhibition wing, complete with humidity control and light, and all the things you need for a museum. Something that has always been one of my career goals here. We totally remodeled and redid the entire building and upgraded all of our electrical systems and the HVAC systems. We added new bathrooms and stepped up. We put on significant improvements to the exterior of our building with gorgeous tropical landscaping by Lisa Nelson. It's very skilled landscape architect. We have an outdoor public art exhibit on what we call our Mural Plaza. And then we put in an outdoor classroom and discovery activity, 31 items of Florida history, not just art-related history, but all kinds of local history is embedded in our coral walkway on the outside, and that's open 24 hours a day, and anybody can do it. We see a lot of families out there with their little legend trying to find all the things that are out there.
With the outside exhibit, I imagine that's helpful in bringing people in. You know, they see the artwork on the outside of the wall. What's in this building?
That's the whole purpose of it in many respects. There are a lot of people out there who are intimidated by just the concept of a museum. It's not in their comfort zone. And we're just trying to lure people in. If you see something beautiful on the outside and you can just walk up to it and sit on a bench and enjoy it and look at it, then maybe you're more inclined to come in and discover what's inside. And we try and always keep our admission fees low. Anybody under 18, it's free. on the first Sunday of the month, it's free. It's only $5 to come in, and if you have
You spend that at Starbucks in a heartbeat.
on less than that at Starbucks or McDonald's. If you're a senior citizen or you have AAA, it's $3. Active duty military are free. Even veterans have a discount. So we do need to have an admission fee, but we wouldn't want it to ever be anything that would keep people from coming in and discovering, because St. Lucie County is where Florida art began.
I mean, if you think about, didn't we say with Bacchus and the Highwaymen?
Well, you know, Florida has a very short history. We're a very young
We're
state.
110 years old.
Who wanted to live here before the Civil War? Not many. But Bacchus is the first Florida-born artist to paint Florida. Prior to Bacchus, people did come and paint Florida. They came down on the Flagler Railway. They came by steamboat in the wintertime. And they are a who's who of American painters. But he is the first native-born Floridian to paint Florida. He painted it through all of its seasons. And yes, Florida does have seasons. And he opened the eyes to Floridians to the beauty around them, to how beautiful a cabbage palm could be. I mean, there's a reason it's the state tree. It feeds us. But when he looks at a cabbage palm, it comes alive.
And it doesn't just, a lot of people associate with the coastal and the lagoon, but there's a lot of beautiful western lands, you know, western landscapes the St. Lucie County painted.
Indeed, when he started painting, those western landscapes were underwater. Bacchus, I believe, was probably Florida's first true environmentalist, because before Marjorie Stoneham Douglas even came to Florida or ever heard of the Everglades, he was down there painting in those glades and discovering just how beautiful a snake-infested, mosquito-ridden place can be. And it took someone to go kind of tread off the beaten path, even as it is today. People lived along the coast because it was more hospitable, to go out there and really take a moment and stop and really look at it and experience it. And because of that, the time he took, his paintings tell a story about all those locations. And the body of his work that really spans between 1918 and 1990 is a visual legacy of unspoiled Florida. And it does something that mere photographs couldn't do. Photographs, when he started, were all black and white. So he captures the subtle light and all the plants and animals, and he really was a tremendous naturalist.
Let's talk about, you mentioned the admission fee real quick, but let's talk about membership opportunities, because there are, I'm sure, membership opportunities for folks that want to come in, because you have a permanent collection, but you also have exhibits that change several times a year.
We change our changing exhibitions in our gallery area, and we kind of straddle the fence between museum and gallery. We've always were a gallery, and we don't want to give that community component up, and the changing exhibitions and local exhibition opportunities. So we do change our shows, and they run the gamut from national traveling exhibits. We started with an amazing show from Cuba to right now we have a juried competition from artwork all over the state of Florida. Our memberships, or we call them our friends of the museum, because no museum can survive without their friends. They start at $50, and that gives you free admission all year long, and discounts and advanced ticket sales, and always a discount if you're a member. Something that's a particular interest to people who are interested in art is at a $150 level. That's a family membership for 4. You receive a gold sticker on your membership called from NARM, which is the National Association of Reciprocal Museums. And that little sticker on your card gives you free admission and discounts at over 800 museums across the country, over 80 of them in Florida. So if you travel anywhere in the state and are inclined to go see and visit, if you go to St. Petersburg and you want to go see the Dali or the Moran or the St. Petersburg Museum of Fine Arts, you can practically pay for your membership right there on that little gold sticker. And it's honored in Vero and at the Elliott, all over the Treasure Coast, we all honor those stickers. And it's a way to get people to make a little larger financial commitment to their local arts institution, with benefits that take them all over the country on their travels.
Yeah, and I know one of the exhibits you always do, I think it's in the spring, is a photography exhibit, local. I mean, again, getting back to the education and local, supporting local arts.
It's coming up very shortly. It is in the spring. Our season's a little cockamamie because we didn't open until November this year. But the next show is our juried photography show. We call it Through the Eye of the Camera. And all of our juried shows are open to amateur or professional. And everybody's work is judged en masse. So if we've had prize winners that someone took on their iPhone. I mean, really fantastic photographs. And you know, when I started here in 1999, there was no such thing as digital photography.
Yeah.
And the first digital photograph that was entered in our competition was rejected because it wasn't real photography.
It didn't fit in, yeah.
Now, instead of 5 film categories, we have 1 film category and 5 digital categories. So the art changes with technology in the times. It's really perhaps the most current of things, and we work very hard at staying abreast of the times and staying current. And now when I think about the big dispute about whether we should accept a digital photograph, it seems laughable.
Yeah.
But at the time it was a big discussion. Sure. Is digital photography true photography? Well, clearly it is.
Yeah.
And that's why we have 5 categories for it.
And then coming up the summertime, you guys usually go dark?
We're not going dark anymore.
We're not? We're going straight through the summer?
We're going straight through the
Awesome.
summer. This is our first year ever and 57 years of staying open. We're going to be open on Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
If it goes well, next year we'll add probably Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Perfect.
We have seen summer travelers
Sure.
coming for long weekends to Fort Pierce, and with this new facility, it's just too beautiful to
Awesome.
go dark.
Now, any idea about summer camps, maybe?
We are going to be collaborating this year with summer camps
Not to
across.
put more work on your plate, but
Well,
you know, as
we
a
have
father
a
or two.
fantastic education
Yeah.
director now. Sandra Van Voorst came. She used to work for the college in
Okay.
curriculum development, and she's our education director, something that came with this new facility. We're reaching out and working with summer camps to have activities at their facility and bringing kids in on field trips. We're going to start running adult education courses next fall, and I know that we have a painting class and a photography class, and one of my pet projects is an iPhone or a cell phone
Sure.
journaling project to work with young kids. I hope we're going to be partnering with the Boys and Girls Club to do a photography journaling program with
nice.
their kids as a way to take young people's constant obsession with taking their own picture and turning it into a deeper journey and to add some meaning to it and creativity and thought.
I mean, Van Gogh was like the first selfie, right?
Yeah, without the ear, it's painful just to look at that. But it isn't just about selfies,
Sure.
it's about a day in
No.
your life and what was important to you and why. So it adds a writing component to it with the visuals, and hopefully it'll last longer than a moment on Snapchat.
What about volunteer opportunities? Now, especially with the additional space, there's probably additional
We're
need.
looking for docents.
Okay.
People particularly to do docent activities with us, again, on that Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
One of the things I think with Backus too, he was really generous with his art and his time. You can find his paintings all over from the county commission chambers to the historical museum, Seal Museum, but he was also really great with working with youth and the community.
He was. Backus had 2 incredibly important influences in his life. His mother, who was a champion of the underdog and was the champion of the local Seminole Indians, who at that time weren't even a recognized Native American tribe, and she championed their cause. And she was also a champion of civil rights and bristled vigorously at the segregation she found in the South. She was from New Jersey, and she just grew up with a different set of a different morality code. And his Uncle Reg Godwin paid for Backus to go to 2 semesters of art school in New York. And when Bean Backus tried to repay him, he said, "I don't want you to pay me back, I want you to pass it on." And that was before there was ever a movie about pay it forward, long before. And Backus took those 2 influences of defending the underdog and always doing what was right, even if you paid a price for it personally, and passing it on. And he took that literally in his life, and he opened his home and his studio to anybody who wanted to come in, black, white, rich, poor, young, or old. It was an environment that I believe could only exist in the South because he was an artist. Because had he been a lawyer or an accountant or a banker, he could have never had a home where all these people were coming and all of this was going on, because people would have never hired him. They wouldn't have hired him to do their law work or their taxes. They certainly wouldn't have trusted him with their money, and maybe they shouldn't have, because he gave all his money away. But he opened his heart and his life, and he lived a colorblind life. And for a man who painted all these beautiful paintings, clearly he could see red and green. He just chose not to look at the surface differences of people, whether that was their wealth or their skin color or their sexual preference. He judged people on the inside. And because of that code, we now have the Florida Highwaymen movement. And it's not a mistake that the Florida Highwaymen, in this amazing visual legacy of the African American Southern Black experience, particularly a rural Southern Black experience, only happened in and around Fort Pierce, Florida. It wasn't that there weren't dynamic, talented, charismatic young African Americans in Mississippi or Alabama or Tennessee or Jacksonville. Here, it all came together because of Backus. He empowered them. Zenobia Jefferson, who was the art teacher at Lincoln Park High School, knew Backus and knew that she could bring her students there and he would welcome them and he would embrace them, as he did with her most promising student, Alfred Hare. He took Alfred Hare under his wing first as an apprentice and then like his second son. They traveled together. He took him to Miami. He introduced him into white society, something that would have never, ever been open or available to any other young black person.
Sure.
But Backus didn't care about social conventions, just like his mother. He didn't really care what people thought of him. He did what he thought was right, and that was to welcome everyone. And he empowered the Florida Highwaymen. The original 9 Florida Highwaymen were welcomed to his studio. He gave them art supplies and helpful hints. They took their artwork in a very different direction because the Florida Highwaymen's artwork is a visual representation of the social and economic restrictions of the time. Because gallery representation wasn't available to them, because they weren't going to have a big party, at the Biltmore in
Asheville?
No, the Biltmore in Coral Gables to celebrate their artwork. Instead, they created artwork not as a luxury good like a Backus landscape, but as blue-collar art, as everyday commodity. And so their artwork was priced and created specifically to appeal to the working class person. And they found their market not just on the sides of the highway, which is how they got the name Highwaymen, but they knocked on the doors of the sheriff's department and the courthouse and banks and lawyers' office and hotels and dentist's office, and all across Florida in the 50s and the 60s. That's where their artwork was hung. But it had to take tremendous courage to go to the sheriff's department and see if anybody wanted to buy a painting, because these were the days with people being, Florida had more lynchings in the 1930s than any other state in the country. And people who live here and come here today don't grasp that. But all of our history isn't about sunshine and palm trees. But the Highwaymen, through their artwork, transcended those boundaries and those barriers, just as Backus, because of his artwork, was able to transcend and push those boundaries and barriers back and to open his heart and welcome him. And that's why 28 people listed in the Florida Artists Hall of Fame are part of the Indian River School and students of Backus, and that is why St. Lucie County is where Florida art began. It's an important legacy. It really is an important legacy, and it deserves national recognition. Backus deserves national recognition, and not to be buttonholed in as a Florida landscape painter. He is a great mid-20th century American painter, and his work spans not just Florida, but Northeast, North Carolina, the Pacific, the Caribbean, Europe. It's a significant body of work, not even including his commercial work or all the portraits that he painted.
Did you ever get calls from other museums around the country interested in his exhibits?
We do, and it all kind of hit critical mass right as the recession was booming, was when we had a big traveling exhibit being marketed. And all of a sudden, even the biggest museums in the country pulled back their budget and said, holy cow, we need to show what we have, or we may have to sell what we have. And it did ultimately end up that many places across the country were faced with the dilemma of selling pieces of their collections to keep their doors open. We blessedly did not have to do that, but it was close.
Yeah, and again, thanks to the Friends of the museum and sponsors. And
a thrifty ethos that goes way back, and we had money in reserves. If I could dispel that's out there. Every year we raffle off a Backus painting as a major fundraiser. We do it on the first Sunday of the month as part of our big Backus brunch that I think this year we had 540 people come, all done by volunteers. But we are not raffling off paintings from our collection. I didn't know until this year people thought that.
That's what it was.
We actually purchased the painting to use for the raffle, because it is against the American Association of Museums Code of Ethics to sell paintings from your collection or artifacts from your collection to raise operational revenue. You can sell something to buy something better.
Okay, to upgrade, yeah.
Yes, you can sell something if it no longer fits your exhibition criteria, which clearly Backus paintings fit our exhibition criteria. But we don't take paintings that we already own and raffle them off and give them away as a fundraiser. That would be going backwards, not forwards.
Another thing that I saw, like since we're myth busting, is if you own a Bacchus, you don't own the rights to have that reproduced.
No, you do not, any more than if you buy a CD. You have the right to reproduce that song and publicly display it.
But I do that all the time.
But they do it all the time. They
Yeah.
do, but it's so pervasive on the internet.
Sure.
It's a constant problem, and musicians constantly bemoan it and
Yeah.
fight it because it's their livelihood. The copyright to Bacchus paintings, and I don't even want to get into all the other artists because copyright law is really complicated and it's changed across time. Bacchus willed the copyright to the Bacchus Museum. He left it in his will that he wanted this facility to control the reproduction rights to his artwork as a means of creating revenue for the
for you guys.
facility and a means of protecting his imagery. And that is long before there were digital scanning or anyone imagined that people in sweatshops in China would be copying masterpieces, sort of,
Yeah.
and selling them. And we have seen all of that happen. We've had
wow.
people scan images out of a book and then print it on canvas and fox out the Bacchus signature and put in their own signature. And we take all of those people to court and have filed federal copyright suits against them because we can't allow that to happen.
Sure, absolutely.
And we do make reproductions selectively of our Bacchus paintings, and we sell them within our museum store.
And you've also supported the new Treasure Coast International Airport lobby with some of those reprints. So we
Indeed,
appreciate
and we
that.
donate lithographs to any not-for-profit organization on the Treasure Coast that puts a request in writing for their event. That's part of our giving back
Sure.
that Bacchus started. And I know it sounds trite, but it's true. When questions arise, I often have to think, what would Bacchus do in this situation? And often what he would have done isn't good business. So we try and balance that because, you know, he sold over 6,000 of his paintings during his lifetime. He had a 4-year waiting list when he died. And he knew great financial success, but he died penniless because he literally gave it all away. He gave all his money away to people, not big organizations with $50,000 gifts to build wings with his name on them. He gave his money away one-on-one to people who were in need. Lots of people in this community went to college on Bacchus paying their tuition. People who were sick or had surgery and couldn't pay the hospital bill, he paid it. He paid people's mortgages when they were down on their luck. He just helped people on a one-to-one basis, passing it along, not just artistically, but in our society in a way that really counted. He gave of his money freely. It meant nothing to him, money. To him, the thing that was important is what he did with his life. He is quoted as having said that he would rather be known as the world's greatest humanitarian than the world's greatest painter. And that is a major statement in his life.
Absolutely.
We're going to have that painted on the outside of our building here
That's a great
pretty
quote.
soon. It is. It really is, because our mission is to promote his artistic and humanitarian legacy. And we can't do that without reaching out into the community, without inviting people in to the museum, and without telling the story of Bacchus, because it is a story of diversity before anyone even knew what the word diversity meant. It is a story of I mean, it sounds trite, of Christian values, of loving one another and doing unto other. And even though he was at best an agnostic and even perhaps an atheist, he embodied that ethos better than many people I know
Who go to church
who
every
go to
Sunday.
church every Sunday. And he had many, many friends who were ministers in a variety of churches, and it was fascinating to listen to them talk, because they came from a theological point of view and he came from a moral point of view. And they shared so many of the same concepts and ideas. So I had the pleasure of spending almost 20 years of my life with Bacchus. I met him when I was a young girl and became part of the studio environment. He opened his home not just to artists and writers, but to kids in the community who found it as a place where they could be accepted and embraced, and I gravitated there like it was magnetic to me. And I can't even paint my own fingernails, and I never could. But we talked about reading and public affairs and philosophy, and he opened my mind to thoughts that nobody ever had at that point in my life. He talked to you like you were an adult and capable of really deep thinking, which when you're 13 or 14, you really have to think to come up with an answer, because if you came up with an answer that he didn't, but he'd flip it around and be the devil's advocate. He really didn't like people to tell him what they thought he wanted to hear. He often said the most boring thing he could think of was an evening of polite conversation. So it was intellectually challenging to be with him. intellectually stimulating, and it clearly shaped my life, and it shaped the lives of dozens and dozens of other people throughout it.
Absolutely. Do you have a few minutes? Maybe you can show us around, or maybe a few of your favorite paintings?
Oh, I'd love to.
We'll take a quick break.
I would absolutely love to.
All right, well, don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at some of Backus's work. Welcome back to Postcards from Home. I'm your host, Eric Gill, and I'm joined once again by Kathleen Frederick here at the Backus Museum and Gallery. I got it right.
You did
Museum
get it right.
and Gallery. They switched it a few years on me. But we're here with one of his oldest works.
It is the oldest surviving work that we know of, and it dates back to 1918 when Backus was 12 years old.
Get out of here.
Yes.
I can't even paint that now at
Neither
my age,
can
in their
I.
40s. Yeah.
As I said, I can't paint my own fingernails. He grew up on the Indian River, and the Indian River Lagoon is a visual narrative through his entire career. He painted it as a gift to his friend Clyde Killer, and Mr. Killer kept it for, I believe, 70 years before he donated it to the museum. And I really think that speaks not just to the depth of their friendship, but to the level of admiration that Mr. Killer had for Backus's painting ability. We have 12-year-olds who come in here on field trips all the time, and they are just astounded at this painting. But that was his front yard. But there's one thing about the painting, I don't know if you can see it. Over here on the left side, there's a big, giant, like a pirate ship, like a big square-masted schooner coming down the Indian River. And anyone who lives here knows that could never happen because there is not enough water
It's 5 feet.
in that river for that sailboat. That's before the Intercoastal Waterway was dredged. So, you know, this is a painting of a little boy. It's a fantasy painting. It's part landscape and part fantasy. And I love the fantasy aspect. Probably Captain Hook is out there on that sailboat going down, or maybe it's pirates. They're coming to raid the port of Fort Pierce. But it's a beautiful painting. It's sensitive. And the one thing that I think is very impressive is that he intuitively understands that at sunrise in the morning, there's no color on these palm trees. He wasn't tempted to try and paint green palm trees at sunrise because he was actually looking at that scene when he painted it. And as people will discover when they come, that the lagoon is a very important thread throughout his career. The museum sits on the edge of the Indian River Lagoon, and we continually try and create a narrative between the lagoon waters and the museum and Backus.
But like you said earlier too, it wasn't just the lagoon. He went west of town and painted what basically is the Adams Ranch property now. I mean,
Well, no, he painted many properties west of town, though.
But they were one of the bigger ones.
One of the things about Backus paintings that people don't realize is they're living on those paintings right now. If you're living in Port St. Lucie, you're living on the Peacock Ranch, you're living on the Becker Ranch. Those properties were giant tracts of undeveloped land, and then they became housing developments and strip malls and Gatlin Boulevard and Tradition, and they're gone now.
Luckily, the county's bought some of those, like the Carlton property out there, which the Becker Preserve, or the Bluefield Ranch. Thank you. It was the other B. But Pinelands, a lot of those you can still find those Backus paintings.
You can, but unfortunately,
a lot of it's gone.
No, it is, and I'm so glad. Our county has an excellent record of buying public lands, and we own, I believe, more public beaches than any other county in the state. I could be wrong, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
Go down in Palm Beach and look at how many public beaches there are. But having public lands stay pristine takes management of them. It's expensive. Nothing comes cheap. And when ranchers owned the land, they made sure the invasive species were kept out. And it's a constant battle. But Backus preserved places that are long gone, and not just here in Fort Pierce, but all across the east coast of Florida and down through the Glades. And it's an important legacy.
Yeah. Now that would be interesting. Is there any paintings of non-native stuff, species in Backus's work? Australian pines or anything like that?
Well, he has paintings of ponciana trees that came from Brazil and jacaranda trees, and I don't believe that they're native.
Yeah. But no lionfish or anything like that. They weren't here at the time.
He wasn't much for scuba diving, I don't think. In fact, in all the years I knew him, I never saw him go swimming once.
Really?
No, he probably did in his early years. He used to go to the Bahamas a lot and Jamaica, but I don't think I've ever seen him go swimming.
Interesting.
No.
He's a
land animal, though he loved to eat fish.
Yeah.
He was a vegetarian, and he loved to eat fish, for sure.
That's good to know.
And he did paint them. If you look over there, we have a little sheep's head on exhibit.
That's true. Is that his?
That's his.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got some, we mentioned Western lands, right?
Yes, beautiful paintings of Western land. It looks a lot like the Everglades. This painting's titled Pines in the Backcountry. And the Glades was much, much larger
Sure.
than it is now. People think of the Everglades as Everglades National Park or maybe south of Lake Okeechobee. But now environmentalists and the Everglades Federation, the Everglades start up in the Kissimmee River Basin, and those are the northern glades. And this wetland, this marsh ecosystem traveled all the way down the center of Florida. And the fact that I don't know if people realize that the Florida Cracker Trail ride came in and out of Fort Pierce is because this was the driest place on the coast of Florida. That if you went north, you were in the Kissimmee River, and if you went south, you ran into the big lake and then the big Everglades. So that's why people traveled across the state, from this section, and it was only relatively dry.
Yeah.
So when you think about these paintings, are these the Everglades? Yes, they are. But are they in Miami? Maybe not. It could have been Palm Beach or Stewart or Jupiter, all the way up into Vero, these great vast grasslands with wet areas. And when you see pines growing like that, that elevation right where those pine trees is just a little higher than everywhere else around it, because pine trees don't like to have their roots wet all the time. So even though this is a wetland, there had to be some little elevation there.
Some little island for this stuff,
Some little island, or the pine trees wouldn't be growing there. And you know, Florida's topography, 4 inches, 5 inches makes a big difference, and suddenly you have a whole new ecosystem. You can see that clearly if you tour the Adams Ranch.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I've been out there had the pleasure of being out there a few times, and it really is old Florida, and it's amazing.
And you won't see many pines out there.
No.
Because the pine lands tend to be further west and just a little bit south. So that may very well be out where the Bluefield is, or on the Peacocks property that's now PGA. But
what's great about this paint, I love, is the pink in it. You know, the colors, and then you look in here and you've got the beautiful greens that pop.
Bright green. This bright spring green, Bacchus irreverently referred to as Jesus green, because it was all about new growth and new life and a resurrection. And you only see that color green in the spring in Florida and on new leaves. Right now, if people were looking outside and they look at the oak trees or the old cypress trees, that's the color that's on those leaves. It's that brand spanking new green, fresh, bright green. And his favorite chair, his chaise lounge, which we have on exhibit, it's painted that color for a reason, because it was his favorite color. And he used it sparingly in Florida paintings unless they were of the spring.
Yeah. Now, what about the frames? So when you get a work like this, now this is on loan, so does it come in the frame, or did he have a certain attachment to frames, or how he framed his work?
In his early career, he made his own frames, and he made them out of molding stock that he bought at East Coast Lumber, just the same way he taught the highwaymen to make their own frames.
Which is one of our oldest businesses.
That's right, one of our oldest businesses. This is an original Bacchus frame, and you can tell because instead of a fabric or linen liner, it has wood. So he made this frame. This painting is the only one of hundreds of Bacchus paintings that was kept by his largest dealers, the Robinsons, who owned a big gallery on South Miami Avenue, and they were his biggest gallery representative, and this is the one that they kept for themselves for their family's collection. So I think that speaks very highly of how they felt about this painting and how beautiful it was. Bacchus understood the subtlety of Florida's light in a way that I don't really know of any other artist who has ever fully grasped it. He saw the colors where other people just saw green, and he was able to capture all the different nuances of Florida's clouds, which are really the Alps of Florida, because we're pretty flat. The only thing we have climbing up in the air are the clouds.
The bridges.
And the bridges, and a few landfills, actually, if you really want to get it. But no, Bacchus understood Florida's light, and he understood it intuitively, and he handled it so subtly that his paintings always feel real to people.
Yeah.
They take you to that place. When you stand at this front of this painting and you're looking at it and you spend time with it, you're there. And you can hear the little cicadas in the bushes, and you can hear the mosquito buzzing your ear, and you can feel just a little bit of sweat trickling down the back of your neck.
I don't know, the air conditioning works really good in here.
But if you go there,
yeah.
Whereas in a highwayman painting of the same exact scene, they didn't have the time or the luxury, or in many cases the ability to put all of it in. So a highwayman painting is about the very essence of the scene, as if you were looking at that from your car window, driving by at about 50 miles an hour. You know what it was, you get it, but you aren't transported there in the same way that Bacchus did with his paintings.
Yeah. Now you've got a photo over here that I think dispels some myths that I've heard about Bacchus's paintings, that he didn't put people in his paintings.
Oh, no, well, it's not a photo, it's a painting.
That's what a photo, sorry. See, I'm used to working in video and stills.
Yeah.
So this is not a photograph. It's an actual painting, an original by Bacchus, and you see people in it.
You do see people in it. Most of Bacchus's early Florida paintings don't have people because Florida didn't have people.
Sure.
So whereas his Caribbean paintings are full of people because Caribbean islands are much more crowded. But this particular painting, which I consider to be the most important painting in our collection, is titled The Marble Game, and it depicts a scene on Avenue D, which was the center of business and commerce in the African American section of town. And it's two little boys playing marbles in the shade of a great big Australian pine tree.
That invasive.
And there's an invasive, but I love Australian pines. I know it's perhaps not eco-friendly to love them, but I do, because they make shade.
They do.
And nasty little pine cones, but shade. But these two little boys have struck up a friendship, and it may not be visible to your viewers, but the boy on the right is white, and the boy on the left is black. And they are just there playing right in the middle of the road, in the middle of a busy street, and they are friends. And I think that this painting tells a story that merges Bacchus's artistic legacy. It's beautifully painted. I mean, it's just as painterly as could be, and his humanitarian legacy. And he's calling on all of us to just reach out and be friends. He could have made this little boy on the right whiter, but I think he likes to have us really pay attention and question. And another thing that I'd like to draw people's attention to is on the right, there's a little teeny baby toddling down the street in a diaper. And I don't look at that in any way as a statement of neglect, but a statement of security, that the parent of this baby is probably sitting on a porch right out of view, and they're sure nobody's going to hurt that little child, because this painting talks about a community of people. It talks about a vibrant environment with people out on the street. There's nobody getting shot. There's no drugs. This is a story of a really lovely day and the innocence of two little children playing.
And what year was this painted?
About 1952. It was purchased by a man who came down the river on his yacht, and he came down from New York. They stopped at the Fort Pierce City Marina, and he met Bacchus, who was there painting a painting of the Indian River. And they became friendly, and Bacchus invited him over to his house for dinner and some drinks. And while he was here, he bought a painting. Not this painting, but he came back every year on his trip south, and he stopped in Fort Pierce, and he and Bean became friends. And this painting he bought. And I'm certain that when Bacchus painted this painting, he did it on location. He saw this scene. This is not something he imagined. And he painted it for himself because it spoke to him, not because he thought somebody was going to buy it. The odds of finding a buyer for this painting in 1952 from Florida,
I imagine we're pretty slim.
Pretty slim. But the gentleman who bought it, he saw the beauty in the story, and he kept it, and it ended up in an attic in Reno, Nevada. He died, and his daughter inherited it, and before he passed away, he had 5 paintings, and he said to his daughter, whatever you do, don't get rid of these paintings. Someday they're going to be worth a lot of money. She held on to them for years. They sat in her attic. She had them appraised and was told by the appraiser in Nevada they were worthless. She should give them to the thrift store.
Oh my gosh.
Thank God she didn't.
Yeah.
And one day she Googled A.E. Bacchus, found us, called us, and donated the painting to our collection.
That's awesome.
And it is the single most powerful Bacchus painting ever done.
That's awesome. That she at least donated it too and didn't try to make a dime off
did.
of it, you know. She
She
realized
did.
the importance of it.
We have a standing offer of $150,000 for it should we ever choose to sell it, but it will never be sold as long as I have anything to say about it. And even after I'm not here anymore, it will never
You're
be
right
sold.
to be in the bylaws.
That's right. I'm going to put it in the bylaws. That's right. The painting may never be sold. We have another really important painting, I think, that I'd like people to see, and that's the last painting.
His
we
last
did.
one? It's right behind us?
It is.
Yeah. And then you've had this one, I guess, since the museum opened?
We've had this painting since right after Bacchus died in 1990. It was donated to the museum, as was his easel, by Don Brown. And Don Brown was Bacchus's business manager and protege. They painted side by side in the studio at 122 Avenue C. And it was left unfinished on his easel when he died in June. And the poor person who had waited for this painting waited over 4 years for it, and they're never going to get it. And I'm not sure if your viewers can see it, but the paper towel on the easel is not a mistake. The cleaning lady did not leave it behind. It was part of one of his tools that he used in painting. And in the case that I'm leaning against are all the paints that he was using in the brushes when he was actually working on this painting.
Wow.
This is such a great teaching aid for me when we have school groups in, because you can see how he constructed the painting. And landscape paintings are generally constructed from the background forward. And because you cannot create a realistic palm tree if you put the clouds in afterwards. Sure. And you can often see in student paintings where they thought, oh, gee, I should have a little cloud peeking through. It never looks right, so don't do it. If you didn't put it in the background before, don't do it in. Yeah. But this painting, again, is of the Indian River Lagoon, a visual narrative that travels right through his career, and it's of a sailboat going down the river, and in the background you can see a little island.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but you got numbers down here on the bottom. Was this his way of dividing the painting?
It's his way of maintaining proportion throughout the painting.
Okay.
This painting would have begun as a sketch on a small piece of paper, and he would have marked it out on the piece of paper. And it's his way of controlling the perspective and proportions of the elements in the painting.
I see now too, he's got it vertical too as well.
So that they ring true, right? Yeah. He sketched in a painting using blue paint, just like you would on a piece of paper with a pencil. And he used that to put the key elements in, and this is how he controls the proportion in the painting, so that all the elements are in balance and appropriately done. One of the things that people don't realize is that this is the horizon line of the painting, and everything below the horizon line is the foreground of the painting, the part that's close to you, and everything that's above it is in the background of the painting. We do a wonderful illustration with children. They'll have the tallest kid in the class and the shortest child come up, and who's tallest, and then we send the tall one all the way to the farthest point, and he gets shorter. And it helps people understand what I'm talking about, that the things that are below are large and close, and the things that are behind are small and in the distance.
And then underneath this painting we have, is this the last finished work?
That's the last finished work, and Don Brown has donated that to the museum's collection. We are so grateful to him for his generosity to us. And again, I've got shadow on it, I'll try and get that off. Yeah. The last poor sucker who waited for that, he didn't get it either. So I'm not really sure who actually ended up with the absolute last Bacchus
purchased one.
Painting. I don't know, a lot of people say they did. But I just love having this painting on exhibit, and then having the benefit. When you look in the case, you see the peach in the sky, you see the green of the trees, it's all right there just like he left it. It's amazing. Such simple tools can make such complex paintings.
Yeah. Now, was he typically brushed? Did he use, it looks like it's all brushed, but I know sometimes they have the knife.
He has the knife here. Throughout his career, his style evolved. He started out painting very flat with brushes, and then he discovered the palette knife, and that was an effort to try and put paint on the canvas more quickly and to emulate the work that he admired so much from the French Impressionist painters, and to try and capture the fading and changing light. So he worked with the knife, and he did that a lot in his early career, especially when he was painting on location. And then as he mellowed throughout his career, his style mellowed, he found it more and more difficult to stand for an entire painting on location. It was just physically exhausting. And the sun, he had damage to his eyes from being out in the sun so much. They didn't have UV filtering sunglasses. So he went to his studio, he sketched and photographed in the outdoors, and then painted in the studio, and then he had more time. And so he softened his work. Perhaps it's a little more romanticized, but one thing that his later paintings do that his earlier paintings don't, the earlier paintings are vibrant and impetuous and full of energy. Sometimes they vibrate. These paintings transport you to that spot, and they are more representational of that fragile, vanishing Florida. So he always used the palette knife in his paintings, but he held it till the end to build up texture and dimension in the foreground and the things that were closest to the viewer. Again, always keeping in mind the power of perspective.
Yeah. Well, Kathleen, I appreciate the tour today, and you taking the time. It's always a pleasure to learn. Every time I come, I learn something new about Bacchus.
Let's not let 10 years go by before we do it again.
We won't. No, we won't. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, whether you're looking for the perfect piece of artwork for your new Florida home, or you just want to soak up some local culture, be sure to stop in and check out the Bacchus Museum and Gallery. Located in downtown Fort Pierce on Indian River Drive, the 8,000 square foot Bacchus Museum and Gallery is a public art facility that celebrates Fort Pierce's most famous painter. Featuring a permanent collection of works by Bacchus and the Florida Highwaymen, the museum also hosts a number of rotating exhibits by local and regional artists throughout the year. The museum is open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Sundays from noon to 4 p.m. And during the summer months, the museum will now be open during Saturdays and Sundays. Admission is $5 for the general public, but free to members, students, and active and retired military personnel. To find out more about the Bacchus, call the staff at 772-465-0630 or visit their website at bacchusmuseum.com. And if you'd like to see previously aired episodes of Postcards from Home or other SLC TV programs, visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/stluciegov. I'm your host, Eric Gill, for myself and the staff. Thanks for watching. We hope you'll tune in again next month as we continue to send out Postcards from Home.